Yala, the deckhand, remembers crouching behind a graviton projector in the cargo hold as the ship was infiltrated after the collision with an Imperial warship. Was it minutes or even hours later when the doors opened to reveal the silhouette of a fugitive passenger, now known to Yala as Sani the artist? It's hard to remember, as the power went down and Yala hid in the dark. Unarmed, he wanted no part of the fight. Sani is a fugitive from the luxury resort on the moon Caladuria of the planet Gina. He escaped the mining colony as it was overrun by acid-resistant barbarians intent on spreading the moon's wealth to the dusty and resource-starved workers on the planet below. Having time only to save a priceless tome of poetry, Sani seeks the Imperial Library to preserve the sacred history. So the first thing we want to say is that we know that Yala has committed to helping Sani, and they've been hiding out here. There's a guard outside the downed spacecraft. At this point, they've waited it out. So there's one guard left. They have to sneak out and get somewhere in Coriolis, in this bizarre area, to find somebody that's going to help them with their continuing their journey for returning this tome to where it needs to go. And so they need to do a basic sneaking roll, that is, an opposed roll, their observation against somebody else's manipulation roll to see. We'll look at the rules here. And so their infiltration is, this is going to be sneaking. So what we're working with here is, yes, so Sari's got the better infiltration going to be at 6, with a contribution from Yala as a co-op, but well, you know what? Yala can't contribute because he doesn't have that value. So we're going to be rolling just 6d6s there for this, and it's a roll that's opposed to the manipulation, the observation score of our opponent. Now, I don't think our opponent has an observation score. There isn't in this book an NPC guard, but there is an NPC soldier, and that is where I'm going for the stats here. So the NPC soldier role here is they don't specifically have an observation score, so that means we'll just be rolling the wits die as the opposition. So the wits of the soldier is going to be just 2. So we're going to be rolling our 6 dice as against the 2 of them. And before I do that roll, I want to say I'm making one addition to the rules to say that we've got here this levels of success table that tells you if you are rolling 1 to 2 dice and you get 1 to 2 successes, it's a limited, 3+ is a critical. I'm also creating, in essence, the opposite of that table, which is to say the failure table. And I'm doing that to help me direct the action depending on what the rolls are. So if it's basically like a level of failure here. So 1 to 2 is a limited fail, it just didn't work. 3+ is like something really bad happened. And so we're going to take this roll and we're going to go first again. We can't have the +1 die because Yala doesn't actually have that trait. So we're going to get to roll just the 6 dice for the Sari's values here. And we got 2 successes. So we got a limited success, but it's an opposed roll. And it is opposed to the 3 wits so we could still potentially fail, but we don't. But we don't get any particular benefits, so they're just sort of successfully, I guess, basically sneaking out. So Yala and Sani are going to be able to sneak out into this crowded area. They're going to sneak past this guard. And I mentioned elsewhere in the video that when I was playing with this, came up with a PC of the deckhand, it reminded me of the interactive fiction computer game from the 80s, Planetfall. This is a novelization based on that. And I'm going to take a chance here and just see whether I can roll on this novel and bring up anything that will be of interest to us in terms of what happens when they step out. Can they kind of step out into something that is suggested buy this novel, and we will see on page 221 if they can. We see, and as the night came fully upon us, we saw that the crevice was merely a line in an extended network of gorges. Now they're outside here, so we are definitely not outside, but we're going to say that it is night. So we're suggesting now it is night. The network of crevices made navigating through the plentiful brush fires a little more complicated, but essentially we did not waver from our course. So we're getting reinforcement here that we're in the right situation to continue on. We were like figments caught in the throes of a nightmare, relentlessly traveling to the center of the horrifying vision so that we might become real. It continues on. They're in the foothills. And then they say, no, that's part of a city. So we are in the city here. I caught up with Alejo as he was staring at a gigantic hand with frozen fingers positioned as if they had torn a hole in the sky before dropping to the earth. The fingers were metal. The hand had been severed at the middle of the forearm. Wires, cables, and platforms lay on the ground like so much garbage. From some of the visible conduits dripped glowing iridescent liquids that ate through the untreated metal they touched or dissolved the rocks on the ground. Other torn conduits revealed facets of city science I could not recognize at all, such as red balls of light that bounced around inside the massive conduit in the center of the forearm, or the continuous stream of sputtering blue sparks in another. So what this is telling me is that it's going to be sending us in a direction in this area of Coriolis, and we're going to go in search of this now, if there is such a thing, sending us in a direction of something about technology, something that is explicitly technological, if we can find that here. I mentioned elsewhere in the video that there's not a lot of random tables in this book, and that makes it challenging for the soloist and maybe even for a non-solo GM to kind of come up with things themselves. I'm going to have a look here in the area of Coriolis Station to see where we might find something that suggests technology as to our goal here. I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself here in saying that in this crowded marketplace, we're just going to figure out where we are and ignore this mechanical hand thing here, because at the very least we need to ask, like, is this related to our story? Maybe it's a vision, an apparition, maybe it's not actually real, but is it related thematically to our story? So we're going to go to an oracle table for that, and I'm going to use this Ask the Stars oracle and do this straight D12 roll to see, is this related to our story? And if it is, we'll need to figure out how. If not, we'll just move on. Ooh, a 12. That's a hard yes right there. So it is related to our story, and we are suggested it symbolizes perhaps unification, identity, and its position is reversal or vanity. So thinking about our characters here, let's just have a look and see. We've got this unification and identity. Well, you know, it's a stretch, but hey, I'm going to go with this. Unification and identity, putting these things together. The earlier, if you watch later in the video, you'll see that I came up with the name Yala because, as I said, there aren't a ton of random tables here in this book, but there was an NPC character named Yala somewhere, and I just chose that name because here it is. I chose that name. This Yala is a smuggler, and Yala came up in this Encounters on the Ozone Plaza table. He's a smuggler with baggy clothes. His activity is searching, and his motivation is money. So we're going to say that this is pointing us toward the Ozone Plaza. Why not? In this area. So we're going to look toward that. We need to go toward the Ozone Plaza, and somewhere there we will find whoever we're looking for, or let's see. Let's read about the Ozone Plaza, because that is now our new destination. It's dedicated to technological gizmos and gadgets. Okay, well that does make sense actually. Maybe this apparition either escaped from there, maybe it's actually alive in some way or programmed in some way, dedicated to technological gizmos and gadgets big and small. Loud bartering for many tents and stalls mingles with the hoarse laughter of off-duty legionnaires. So basically, they are now traveling through this crowded plaza to the ozone, or through this crowded sort of market area to the ozone plaza. And it's the place to go for all your technological needs. So, you know, despite the name, the air in the plaza is actually quite pleasant. Workshops here can make repairs to all kinds of gear as well as make modifications. Is it possible that this artist, we don't really know much about the artist, but is it possible that this rare tome is actually a mechanical device and not indeed, maybe it looks like an old book? That's kind of what I was envisioning in my own mind, but maybe it's actually some type of mechanical device that is not, it looks like a book, but it is not necessarily a book, and it contains, perhaps it is a computer, computer memory of a history of a place or something that is made to look like a book. If one has proper context, one can even place an order with a real court-appointed gunsmith. We don't really have any weapons. Weapons bought here cannot always be claimed right away. I wonder, do we need to get some weapons? Is that telling us this? In the alleys around the plaza, there are several mercenary agencies, with the Black Skull being the most famous. These supply groups to clients in need of security or combat missions. Okay. And there is Gabriel's Ammo Store, Tattoo Alley, Biosculptor's Block. And these are some, as mentioned, of the encounters. I think that, you know, they're going to be traveling here, and maybe they are traveling to a place. Let's see. Well, there's going to be going to 1, 2, or 3 places, because we only have 3 named places. Again, I know it's a refrain, but just not a lot of random tables here to work with. 1, Gabriel's Ammo. The elderly one-eyed legionnaire Gabriel is one of the best arms traders on the plaza. So, arms trader, you know, he's a trader. He trades in everything from special ammo to bespoke firearms. His most well-known creation is the Legion Carbine Inferno, which has its built-in grenade launcher replaced with a compact flamethrower. Well, we're not in the business of weaponry, really, so I don't know what we're doing with this arms dealer, but we're going to search him out, and I think when we get there, we're going to be having some conversation with him, and maybe we're going to show him this device that we have, and perhaps this device is actually mechanical in nature. All right, so we're going to do a survival roll to see whether we can find our way to this place directly, or whether there's going to be some issues along the way. The survival roll typically would be, Sonny has survival, so that would be a 5 dice roll, but I'm going to go to the difficulty chart, and with the sort of GM prerogative, say that this is not actually just normal, that this is actually a relatively demanding task. I don't know that it's hard, because I think we can assume that this place is familiar on some level to these characters, but they're in hiding. They didn't necessarily expect to be here, so we're going to take a -1 modifier on that, thus leaving us with a 4d6 roll to do, and we're going to see whether we can find a direct route, what type of success we have in finding our way there, and indeed, we have a failure, and in fact, we have a pretty significant failure, because, as you recall, I have a levels of failure chart. 3+ is something really bad happened. So in fact, that is a definite fail. And what really bad happened? They're walking through this crowded bazaar, and I guess the obvious is they're spotted. They're spotted by either one of the guards or somebody who is all of a sudden in the midst of this crowded people, sort of pointing to them and running after them to capture them, I guess, to intercede and capture certainly Sani, but now Yala too is in trouble. And who are they captured by? Well, they are captured by a Skavara. While originally from Amado, traders brought these snarling, badger-like semi-intelligences first to Algol and later to Coriolis, where they have multiplied in the shadows of the cellar. The Skavara keep out of sight and live off of what they can find, which usually means garbage and leftovers if they live close to a human settlement. They usually live in leaderless packs or alone. Sometimes they gather around a strong leader for a short time and then disband and possibly reform the group. They're guarded and vigilant creatures, but also curious and fast learners. Like the glitter thrush, they collect all sorts of colorful and shiny knickknacks. City-dwelling Skavara often adorn their fur or simple clothing with copper wires, fiber optic cables, or pieces of shiny plastic. This is a city-dwelling Skavara that is, I think, going to be connected to the trader that we were going to see, but also who was connected to that piece, that metallic hand and technological item that we were investigating, that we picked up and were also taking with us. And we are grabbed by this Skavara, and we are smelling this pungent odor, that the stench that they can let off in their scent glands when they're marking their territories, or in this case when they are enraged. And we are being grabbed by this, and I think we're going to have to deal with it to try to escape, or to try to, we're certainly going to try to resist being captured by this guy. Now, it does say here they're semi-intelligent. Their semi-intelligence makes them able to learn human languages, but their throats and mouths are bad at mimicking the sounds. They can usually bark or yap only a few hundred words, but can communicate much more clearly through sounds or body language. So maybe in our struggle, the first thing we're going to try to do is maybe communicate with this guy and say, or this creature, I should say, and try to communicate with him in some way. We're going to go with a manipulation roll. So it's an opposed roll, manipulation against manipulation. So he's going to be rolling 3 dice, and these are going to be his 3 dice. Now, normally we would have a big benefit here, because we've got, Sani's got seven dice here, and Yala can contribute 1 if we do a cooperative roll. Although I don't know if we can do cooperative. I think we can do that for manipulation. I'm going to say we can, but nevertheless. So that would be 7. That would be 8 d6s. However, this is definitely a case where is it insane to try to communicate with this? It's at least hard. It's almost insane, I think, to try to communicate with this guy. So that's a -3. So we're only going to get 5 dice here. And so we will do this and see what we get. We're going to do 5 against 3. And what did we get? Well, nobody rolled really well. We got basically a very, very limited success here, and we kind of lucked out on the poor rolling of this guy. But nevertheless, that does not translate to us communicating much to him. Maybe he loosens his grip a little bit on us, but I think we are still going to try to escape. So let's ask the stars, like in this instance, should we try to resist further? And we'll just go with a straight D12 roll on this. Should we try to resist further? We say, oh, a hard yes. A hard yes. We're going to try to resist further, and so we're going to struggle and escape, and we're going to have some combat here. That's what that tells me, that we are just not having this, and we're going to do our best to fight our way out of it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll for initiative, and we're going to assign this more or less purple die to Sani, the red one to Yala, and the black one to this enemy here. And we also note that because Yala has this Dura knife. He's going to get a +1 to whatever he does roll. So we'll give this a roll, and we got, wow, we got all the same. You know, I don't know what happens in this case. I think we do a re-roll. One roll. We get one more roll, no modifiers. So I guess that means that the knife modifier is out. So we'll do a re-roll here. And wow, another tie. Look at that, another tie. So we know at the very least that Yala there is going to be going last. And now it's a question of whether Sani or this enemy gets the, oh my gosh. Wow, okay. All right, there we go. And now we got a tie there. I don't know if I might be doing something wrong here, but now, all right, this is it. This is the order here. So we are grabbed, and we decide we're going to struggle, and as a result, we are going to be subjected to the incoming attack of this enemy. I had a closer look at the description of this Skavara and noticed something that was rather disturbing. And what I noticed is that because of this stench, it says enemies within close range get a -2 modifier to all actions until they get away from it. They also have to test force, suffering 2 points of stress if they fail. The bottom line is that because we have no ranged weapons or anything, this would definitely overpower us. And in fact, despite what I said earlier and showed you earlier, we would not resist. It makes no thematic sense. It doesn't make sense to roll on an oracle table to determine that. It just doesn't make sense with the story. I kept that in there in the video to show you that sometimes when you're playing solo, and especially if you're working with oracle tables and going to the rolls too much. I mean, I tend to do it very little, but in this instance, I didn't follow my own advice and just kind of went back to determine a real thematic action. You can come up with something that doesn't make sense. These two guys would not be able to resist this Skavara. I don't know if they give the size of this thing. I think they compare it to something, but they would not be resisting this. Well, there's a picture of it, so at least it looks pretty big. They would not be resisting this. They're going to be grabbed by the big hands and claws of this, sort of by the scruffs of their neck in a way, and dragged to whoever this guy works for. And then that is where we would go next to see who this Skavara is in the employ of. And we would go, probably at that point, we would go to see who this guy is, who sent this guy, basically. And that would take us into another area of the story. Now I'm going to stop here for the story due to the length of this video, but I'm leaving it off at a point where there could be many different directions, and this is where you would go back to the rule book and look at some of I would go to the area of the various factions, most likely, and come up with either something that made thematic sense or something, a random roll to determine the connection of this enemy and who is actually sending this guy out, and advance the story in that manner. The next portion of this video, if you've been watching it all along, is going to show you as a backstory how I got from this massive rule book to the story that you just watched. And then at the very end of the video, there'll be some concluding remarks. I'm going to talk to you working through the book about how I would approach setting up a session. My intention right now is not necessarily to show you the actual gameplay, because I think on some level doing that is the easy part. You know, going through character creation is the easy part. Putting together your encounters with an enemy and doing combat and following the combat rules is the easy part. What is challenging for a soloist is to try to figure out how to take this massive material, how to approach this massive material, and create a story anchor yourself enough to create a story that is both specific and small enough to be playable by you as the player and the GM, but also thematic enough to make you feel like you're in this world, to interact with the lore of the world and the concepts behind the world enough to make it feel like you're playing Coriolis and not just something else. So the goal right now in the video, and it might change. I mean, if you're watching this and in editing, I've done something different, you're going to see it in the notes here, what transpired differently. But my plan right now, as I just sort of paged through the beginning of the book to show you some of the art and the beautiful thematic layout, is to walk you through how I would approach this rule set. And you could even follow along if you have the rule set and take these ideas that I'm doing and modify them as you see fit to create your own story as a way in. And I'll talk about the many different directions that one could take at any given moment. Because when you're dealing with a rule set so expansive and something really beyond a rule set, but an entire universe that's been created, there are numerous ways to develop a story, a session for yourself, whether it's even a one-off adventure session or certainly part of some larger campaign. So that is my plan, and I'll tell you, for transparency's sake, while I have looked through the book, maybe slightly more slowly than I'm doing here, but not terribly much more slowly, I have not really focused on exactly how I would approach it in detail. I don't have anything already planned out, and I'm just going to be showing it to you. I'm really going to be going through this as I would if I wasn't on camera, because that is one of the themes of the questions I get most on the channel, has to do with how I make these decisions and kind of understanding how the stories that you see in my videos are developed, how the foundations for those stories are created. And that's what I'm going to show you here, because you could go to other videos and watch die rolling and stats and modifiers, but what I want to talk about really is the development of story and how, as an individual player who's going to be both participating as the GM and as the PC, how you would approach something so vast as this. So moving back, we certainly didn't really get very far in the book, and I'll show you here what we have at the end. I mean, when we're talking about different worlds, I mean, we're literally talking about different worlds, and the level of detail and information is just extraordinary, and the art, you can see, is also very beautiful and involving, and it can easily draw you in. By necessity, one thing I'll say at the outset is when I'm going to call, for the sort of shorthand sake of this video, I'm just going to call them big rule sets. So when approaching a big rule set like Coriolis, and by that I mean not just the mechanics of the rules, but the entire development of the world and how this world is built into the rules and the level of detail, you know, just randomly opening it here, the detail of the bonus, the cost, the weight of all of these vehicles, for example. When dealing with this, or here's various consortium companies and the name of the company and what their industry is. When dealing with rule sets like this that are so large, I would say almost the larger the rule set, the smaller you want to go at the outset. The looking for a place within the rule set where you can get a toehold into creating something. Now, that said, when dealing with any rule set, but particularly a space rule set, one needs to consider the fact of the world that you're in, the literal planet that you're on, and or whether you're traveling in space. And being true to the rule set is important if you're going to try to feel as if you're in the world. And here, what one does need to do is to think about the type of spacecraft that you're in. starting out here, you can see at the beginning when in laying out, it says, what do? You're going to crew a spacecraft. Most of the spaceships, I think, have 5 crew in them. And you can do things like exploring the world, unraveling secrets. The Coriolis, in a nutshell, says that it's a role-playing game set in space. There are ships, space stations, and starry vistas, just like in any other space-themed RPG. What separates Coriolis from other sci-fi RPGs is first and foremost the social environment, which in Coriolis is strongly inspired by the Middle East. The unique features of the game are listed below. They start out by saying Arabian Nights in space to give some flavor for what this world that's created is. There's a theme of old versus new, the conflict between some early settlers and the second wave of colonists. Mysticism and icon worship, and it's called religion also, is important in the world here. And then the last thing they list here is the dark between the stars. The omens have foretold it, and the clergy have preached it for a long time now. The dark between the stars, the unspeakable, corrupting force at work in the intersection between civilization and the endless nothingness of space. In Coriolis, the dark between the stars plays roughly the role of the devil in Earth's Christianity. So it's helpful here, actually, at the outset of this massive book, to get some sense from the designers of what is important about this world, thematically as well as mechanically. And we're talking here about some type of ancient myths colliding with high technology, the old versus the new, and a very strong sense of mysticism. So to keep true to the gameplay, I would say that it would be important to keep some or all aspects of that in the story that you're doing. Now, then there are a lot of discussions of the beginning, the third horizon is the 36 star systems. I might have said 32 at the beginning. I mean, that's just massive, and a lot of it is detailed in here. In my mind, when I'm doing something like this, I have to really make a decision about what I'm focusing on and what I am just dropping. And I can say right now at the outset, for example, I am going to develop or go into the spacecraft rules to the extent of I want my characters or character to be on a spacecraft or to at least have one. Maybe it just landed, I don't know. But I think that because those rules are pretty extensive, they're going to be important thematically. And so we are going to look at that. And but we're not, for example, I know, either in this video or if I played it off camera, I know I wouldn't do space combat. I wouldn't do combat with another spaceship. Why? Well, for tons of reasons, but the first one is that, especially as a soloist, in order for me to do that, I'd have to first of all build a whole other spacecraft, because unless I'm mistaken, there's not any sort of preceded spacecraft here. And second of all, it doesn't really feel very emotion-laden to me. Now, my understanding in Coriolis of the way the combat space-to-space or spaceship-to-spaceship combat works is slightly different, because the characters are given roles, and they are not R-O-L-L, but R-O-L-E within the ship, and that they then do certain different types of combat. So there is a mechanism for involving it's not just like anyone shooting a laser. Nevertheless, for me as a soloist, it's too much. So I know right away that's not going to be part of my story. Could that be part of your story? Absolutely. Everything is different here, and I should have said at the outset that what I'm presenting here, obviously, is just my interpretation, how I would approach this. There are a million different ways to approach this rule set. I will try at various points as we go to show you or be explicit about the decisions I'm making and talk about another decision that could have been made at that point. Anyway, moving back. So usually I advise in other types of rule sets, and that by other I mean for the most part, say fantasy or smaller rule sets if they are space, not to necessarily start with character creation. And you can look at many videos on my channel if you want to know the reasons for that. But in this case, I'm going to follow through the book, and I am going to start The first thing that is advised here is to create a group. So it says before creating your PCs, you should decide together what kind of group your PCs make up. Now I know that for my play, I'm going to have one PC and I'm going to really abstract out the group. So I'm going to have some concept of a group, but I'm only going to really develop one character within that. And I'm going to place that character in the spaceship, and it's just going to sort of be magically piloted and engineered and run by these other people in this abstract group. So I see here that there are different group concepts, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 group concepts. So I'm going to do this randomly because I think that will account for at least the possibility that various people have different ideas about what they're going to do. And so I'm just going to show a random creation. But the first thing that I would do is, or that I am doing, is I'm going to roll this d6 and I'll re-roll on a 6 to get the group. And so my group is going to be free traders. Commerce is what greases the wheels of the Third Horizon, and the hub of trade in the region is the space station Coriolis. Free traders are the entrepreneurs and innovators of the horizon, embracers of the new order. So immediately I know a lot about what I could be doing here. I could be having a very a sort of pick up and deliver kind of scenario if I was just trying to get right into a scene, because talking here about we're free traders. We could also, perhaps maybe we're smugglers, maybe we're doing something like, well, it says here that we could be smugglers. So we could be trying to do something on the side, like a Firefly kind of scenario here. Couriers delivering valuable information. So these things are possibilities, and it says possible character concepts with sub-concepts are a list here. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, we could just do we could even get our whole character from here. So if we did it that way, we would have a soldier, a free trading soldier here. Corsairs, mercenaries, smugglers. The list of cold-blooded fighters out there in the dark is long. You and your Vulcan carbine protect the group when the going gets rough. So right there, I could do it that way and get my character and make my character be some type of soldier. So that's one option. Just really specifically, you're immediately grounded in something here, and that is the beginning of story. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to leave this part aside because I noticed when I was rolling through, and just as an aside also, again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to roll this randomly. I just did, but honestly, looking at like the explorers, if you decided to be explorers, you could have essentially dungeon crawls in space. You could be looking for artifacts. You could look in the lore of this book for something that is mentioned and then go find it. Anything along those lines. But we're sticking with the free traders, but I'm not going to go to the subcategory, although you could do that. A key concept here is that it says your PCs will begin play with a spaceship, and yet it is not entirely your own. So you owe some debt. Who you owe the money to is up to you to decide. It could be your patron, some other NPC, or maybe your nemesis. So this right here is a place where I would make a note of it, or I will make a note of it in some manner, to return to and kind of flesh that out, because this could be a key part in a story I tell. Maybe I'm running away from that debt. Maybe I stole something to pay off that debt. Anything in the rule book that suggests some type of dynamic relationship between one or more things is a place that I want to remember, because this could be a place to generate a story. We're only on page 19 of, this massive 383 plus page book, and I already have a bunch of story ideas. I don't have a character. I don't have a spaceship. I don't have a world. I don't know where in this universe we are, but I have a bunch of story ideas just from reading the book in this manner. All right, moving on. When creating your group, pick one of the talents connected to your group concept. Everyone in the group can use this talent. Talents are described in Chapter 4. We're going to do that now because this is going to yield more theme. It's going to yield more backstory. Perhaps it's going to create in my mind, or help me create in my mind, the adventure that we're going to be that we would be running. So that's on page 66. And let's see, it's time to get some Post-its going here. So I want to remember this concept of debt. I should probably be making a note of the free traders. And now we're going to go to the talents section. Your group gets to choose one talent connected to your group concept. As said, everybody can use it. So free traders, they're right here. There's only a choice of 3. One is when trading, you get a +2 to manipulation. Now, again, let me say, I don't even know the details of the rules yet. It doesn't matter. The point is, this is a narrative description, manipulation. That's narrative, that's story. So this nose for beer trait, don't know what that's referred to, but it means that I am a manipulator, sneaky perhaps. Everything is for sale. You have a knack for finding the most corrupt public servants, toll officers, or guards, and always get a +2 to manipulation when you are bribing someone. So this is a trading kind of benefit. This is a bribing kind of benefit. And the last is you find the quickest route. Travel takes half the amount of time, or one encounter along the way may be ignored. Okay. My suggestion here in reading these 3 things is to think about, to abstract out a little bit from the specifics of the rules they refer to what this could mean thematically. Because again, we haven't even focused on the rules. We don't even know what the rules are. A manipulation benefit in trading versus a manipulation benefit in something about bribery suggests to me that a bribery manipulation benefit is more of a thematic story having to do with perhaps the political situation in the universe. I know there are factions here that in some manner the story would be, the characters would be connected to larger forces. The trading manipulation, that suggests to me that's kind of more of a Firefly-esque situation to me. Maybe smugglers, maybe just, wheelers and dealers on a more local level. And then the travel one encounter along the way may be ignored, quickest route. I'm not feeling much of a story from that. That to me is something that I am less interested in. And of the other 2, I'm going to choose this trading manipulation because to me, as a soloist approaching this kind of rule set, while I'm going to be reading about the factions to some extent and perhaps setting them in my backstory, I don't want that to be the key aspect of my group talent because it would be too much, I think, to manage for me. Somebody interested in building out the whole world and then placing their characters within it might want to choose that as the soloist, because then you could do, in effect, a ton of GM prep to create, develop factions and some type of political scenarios where you would be interacting with the public servants and you would have this bribery benefit. So these are what my notes look like right now, and it's somewhat coming together in a sense. I've got my free traders, and my group talent is going to be something to do with trading. They owe a debt, as we know, and I had noted down possibly that they were smugglers earlier. I made a couple of other notes in here as prep, and we're going to turn to these pages now to see what those notes, why I pulled out the 2 sections here. The first is there's a section on page 213 of the book, if you happen to be watching this video with the book in hand, that talks about the small players. And it says the small players are groups and organizations operating one level beneath the faction. So as we talked about in the earlier portion of our video here, there are a number of different factions that operate at the large level of the interstellar, interplanetary, economic, political, social relationships, and manipulators of this or attempting to be manipulators of this world. And they are, it says the horizon, these 26 or whatever they were planets, is not dominated by a single power, but instead a wide range of groups struggle to claim the title. These are the factions. They're monolithic organizations divided into two groups, fighting economic, cultural, and military wars among each other to further their individual agendas. Now, for me, as a soloist, especially when I see something that says monolithic, I immediately say to myself, at most, this is going to be in my story thematically. That I'm not equipped, or maybe I'm equipped, but I don't have the desire to spend a lot of my playtime building out or interpreting for myself as the player a history of a monolithic organization, or to model out economic struggle or cultural and military struggle. That to me is something very naturally built into a tabletop RPG campaign that would be run over a period of months, years, what have you. However, they do exist in the world, and as you'll see later on, we're gonna focus on one of them through a random roll, just to kind of give that as the context for what we're doing. Because again, we need to be in the world, in this universe in some way, to make it be that we're playing actually this universe. But back to the rule set here. So in the rule set itself, it says that these small players are groups and organizations operating one level beneath those factions. The factions may be the true rulers on the horizon, but they cannot run everything themselves, and some areas of business are, at least officially, better left to players of more questionable repute. So we have here the free trader markets and various freelance agencies, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a random roll here. These are the freelance agencies, and I'm going to do a random roll. It's a D66 table to come up with, it says, a few examples of freelance agencies doing courier, detective, or investigation work. Roll or pick a suitable employer. Well, I think we're going to be doing detective work. I think I'm feeling like maybe we're going to be doing some type of courier work here. So I'm going to be rolling on the D66 table, reading orange and pink, and that is going to be a 32. And so we rolled up the Algol Express. This is the contact person's name. It says Express, Passenger, and Animal Transport. So that is the concept of some type of, I'm not going to go with animal, I'm going to go with express passenger transport, is going to be in some way something to do with our story. I guess maybe we're going to be transporting a person rather than an item. And I'll tell you, in general, I would prefer to be working with an item because it's easier to get that from a random table. For a person, I'm going to have to either find a random table of NPCs or create one myself. But we're going to stick with this for the purposes of this demonstration. That said, of course, there's no rules here, right? So one could interpret this however one wants, and I could say, well, I'm not doing a passenger, I'm going to be doing an item. But maybe what I'll do is I'll find an item, and then it'll be the passenger carrying that item, and that will be how I get to the passenger. Nevertheless, I'm going to make a note of that, and that is going to be some relationship to the structure of what's going on. And then the last thing I'm going to do at this time anyway in the video is to turn to page 140. And page 140 is a table, a very short table, that is in the middle of a section on space travel and star travel. It's called Failed Portal Jumps, and it says roll on the table when a portal jump fails. Again, I don't even know what it means to have a portal jump fail mechanically in these rules because I haven't read those rules. But when I saw this table when I was flipping through, I thought to myself, this is a random table that describes something that could potentially be like an inciting incident in the story, somewhere to start my story. So I am going to roll on this table for that, and we are going to see what that has to say about our world. We rolled a 36, and that's going to bring the ship colliding with another ship or some debris on its way into the portal. This has the same effects as ramming. Okay, So there was some type of collision happening perhaps while we were trying to transport somebody, or maybe what happened was there was some type of collision, and as a result of that collision, there was entry onto our ship from another ship, and this passenger that we are in our story trying to transport, maybe that passenger like escaped from the other ship. Maybe that's where we're going to go with this, that we are a group of, I was thinking smugglers, but now I'm thinking maybe like more like ragtag like helpers. Like we come in, we're fixers. We're on the DL, but we're like we fix problems, or we're good people who try to help others. And somebody, as a result of this collision, has shown up on our ship and needs to get somewhere. And that is what our story is going to be. So I have the sense of the story. I don't yet know even who my character is. And so now what I want to do is go back to the beginning where we saw the various character types here. We have your characters. We'd talked about the group. We're not really following this, but I should point out there is this kind of list here. Pick a group concept, your spaceship, your talent, your patron. We didn't do that. And your nemesis. We kind of abandoned that, but that's okay, because I'm feeling that we're getting into our own little story here. We may go back and get the patron and the nemesis here. There's a listing here of characters that could be the free trader's patron and or nemesis, including a merchant specializing in technological artifacts, an antiquities dealer, an agent of a consortium-owned corporation, a shady peddler. I'm gonna probably not develop this right now. I'm gonna keep going with this. I'm going with this concept of an escaped, I don't want to say prisoner, like wrongly accused person in some way from this other ship that now is going to be our smuggled passenger. That's how we're going to get the smuggling theme. Our smuggled passenger. We're going to try to take this person to where they want to go with some manner of urgency, and that's also going to, cause us, I think, to be probably followed by somebody at some point, or at least it could be. Now, as to the characters, when I opened this book up the first time, and this is really, as I said, only the second time I've looked through this book with any level of detail at all. As soon as I saw artist, I thought, well, I want to play an artist, because how often in role-playing games is there a character of an artist? At least as far as I'm concerned, not that often. Of course, we have the bard, I suppose, as a type, but in fantasy. But I love this concept of the artist. But I want to show you what the options are. There's a data spider, basically an analyst, data genie kind of guy, a fugitive. Now, we have this passenger, so perhaps if we develop that NPC, the NPC is going to be a fugitive type, a negotiator, an operative, this is an assassin or a guardsman. Let's see what they say. I'm the negotiator, an agitator, or a diplomat, or even a peddler. Could be any number of these things. Pilot, fighter pilot, preacher. We mentioned the concept of religion, and I said that it was important in this world, and of course I haven't talked about it at all until now, but that could come up. So this is a missionary or a prophet, a scientist. We have a ship worker, a soldier, trailblazer, a sort of a scout type, colonist, and that's it. I'm going to, the things in this instance, as I said, I'm not going random. I didn't even count how many options there were. I'm feeling the artist. I just don't know how that fits into the story that I'm now developing. Maybe the artist is the passenger, but I don't know. That's more of an NPC character. I'm feeling the artist or the ship worker. Feeling the artist or the ship worker. On the ship worker, I'm getting a kind of planetfall sort of scenario. If anyone knows that reference to just like a lowly person on the ship who's going to become important. So I'm thinking, though I had thought artist, I'm now thinking maybe ship worker. Maybe in the aftermath of this collision, the passenger who escaped, the fugitive who escaped from the other ship, like somehow was encountered this ship worker who was like cleaning below decks or something and begged for some type of aid, and they were stowed away by our ship worker, and that's where our action begins. So as you can see now, just from working with the rule set as I have developed a story. We haven't created a character in particular yet, although now we know it's going to be a ship worker. And we haven't even gone over the rules yet, or given attributes, or looked into the talents, or any types of relationships here. But I have a sense of the story. I have a sense of a lowly hero who is called upon in a moment of crisis during this a collision happening and an enemy party boarding whatever ship they are on. And in all of that confusion, an escaped passenger from the other ship who begs for mercy to be hidden and taken somewhere. And that is the story. And that is how I would create something that one could play solo out of this rule set. All right, so in thinking a little bit more about this, first of all, I printed out a character sheet. Obviously, I'm going to do the gameplay. By the time you watch this, you will probably know that, but as of this filming, I just decided to do that. What's going to happen is we're going to be on Coriolis. We're going to be on the beating heart of the horizon, cradle and holy shrine of the civilization. And in the book, there are a lot of, there's the history of the space station and the facts about it. There's a timeline of events here, and there are the parts of the station, 3 parts, not counting the cellar, the spire, the core, and the ring. Each part has its own distinctive style and atmosphere, and we are going to, for the beginning of our adventure, I think we're going to randomize again where we land here and where we go. Everything can be bought for money on the promenade. So this is a just gorgeous, lushly illustrated book. And I'll say as a side note, and this may come up again in my comments at the end of the video, but just thinking about it now, I have to be honest that in looking at this material, I really wonder what it would be like to actually be a GM around a table trying to use this, because it's just, first of all, it's really heavy and unwieldy, and second of all, I don't know, it's laid out gorgeously to read. I'm not sure on some level how practical it is play-wise, but that would be for someone else to say, I suppose. In any case, we're going to have, I think we're going to end up using this material to set up the beginning of the actual adventure. I think I'm also deciding that the passenger, as well as I'm going to basically have the 2 PCs. I'm going to start with that. We have the backstory of how the crew member and the passenger, who may be an artist, not sure, come into relation to one another. And so we're going to see this randomized in some way. I do want, because I have the material here, I do want to go to the next chapter, which talks about systems in the KUA system. This is one of the most important star systems here, we can say. This details the most important locations here. This is the hub of the third horizon, and it has a strategic position and is home to the space station Coriolis and the rulers of mankind. But it's more than that. This chapter will describe the different planets and regions of the system, and we're just going to randomly roll on this to come up with a planet that I guess we'll say that the passenger is from, because I think our PC as the crew member is going to be this sort of the more basic character, I guess, for lack of a better word, or maybe we'll have a backstory, but the narrative, I think, is going to come in with the passenger. So we have here, I didn't actually check to see, let's see, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess we have 7 described areas here. So we'll roll a d8 and see what we get on that. And we got 2. So the information that we have connecting the passenger is going to be whatever the second entry here is, and this is Gina. This is the
so it is inhabited, but it is a rough and tumble place. It's a hard scrabble place. However, my sense of the passenger character is not somebody that comes from that place. But we have here a note that there is a moon here. Caladuria has blossomed thanks to its strategic location and the fact that Coriolis and the Council have become key players in the politics of the horizon. The station's wide domes and panoramic windows make it look like a water lily on the surface of the moon, with its heart burrowed deep inside the rock-like roots. The station started out as a dirty mining colony, and exactly how it has been able to transform itself into a luxury resort is debated both in the free trader cantinas out in the Rimworld Reach and in the halls of power on Coriolis. So that is where our passenger is connected in some way to this luxury resort here that is on the moon of this land. And so for our ship person, we're asked about origin stories. I'm going to leave that sort of open-ended here.
So we're a ship worker. I think we're going to be a deckhand. So let's get this notebook back out. All right, so our upbringing here, let's just go to this. Well, I'll show you. We're going to be, for the deckhand here, it's just a sort of basic plebeian upbringing. So we're going to have 15 attribute points to spend, and we're going to have 8 skill points, a reputation of 2, and we're going to have 500 money. Now, I have yet to decide whether I'm going to actually how much I'm actually going to use the money. Okay, when you create your PC, you get a pool of points to spend on your attributes. You must assign at least 2 and at most 4 to each attribute, with an exception of the key attribute for your concept, in which case you can place 5. So let's look at our reputation is going to be -1 because of our ship worker. So we're going to have a reputation of just 1, unfortunately. And for our all right, we're basically all set up here and ready to go. The last thing I'm going to do is, here I have Yala and Sani, and they have their items and gear from the rule set. But as you know, I like to give everybody a trinket, and I usually, moreover, base a core story point on that trinket, taking the concept that I put forward in many videos that you can get something very general and large out of something very small. I'm turning to ICRPG for my trinket table because interestingly and strangely in a way, in Coriolis, there's like basically almost no random tables. I mean, there's no item table. There's very, very few random tables at all. There are lists of characters with some stats, but that's pretty much it. So I'm turning to ICRPG, and I'm going to do 2 rolls on the sci-fi loot table in here. It's a D100 table, and we're going to give what we roll, or at least the thematic concept, if not the particular item, to each of our characters, and that whatever we come up with there is going to form the basis of some story point of connection for them. So as mentioned, it's a D100 table, and we're going to roll first for Yala, because Yala is the first person that was in the story. So Yala has a 91, which is a hydraulic barricade item. Install on any physical door or portal. Becomes a 3-heart challenge to open. So Yala has some type of hydraulic barricade, and we're going to note that here in pencil to remind ourselves that this comes from another rule set. I'll put down the page number here, but basically the concept here is it's some type of, let's go back and look here. It is some type of protective device that, or some type of protection perhaps, or perhaps we are signaling that Yala is a character offering protection, as we already knew. That's reinforcing the fact that he's going to offer protection to Sani, and Sani's item, Sani's trinkets, Sani's thematic trinket is going to be 34, and that is an Imperium uniform. It's a +1 armor, captain rank with sidearm and full outfit. Well, what this says to me is that it is indicative of Asari's elevated status in his world. Now, his world is artistry. His world is not military. So the +1 armor bonus, we're not taking that literally in any way, but what we are taking this to reinforce is this concept that Sani is of an elevated state in his world. He is escaping that world with something vital and meeting up with Yala in the way that they did through this accidental spacecraft collision. He has successfully implored Yala to help him, and that is where our story is going to start. I received more requests to do a treatment of Coriolis, I think, than any other rule set so far, and part of that is because as the channel has grown, I'm just getting more requests and comments in general, and I think another part of it is because it is a very compelling rule set, but it's extremely challenging to contemplate doing this as a solo. As we look here at the credits, I showed these at the beginning of the game, but I'll show them again. The reason that I presented the video as I did and spent so much time showing you how I walked through the approach here is because many of the requests that I received were from people who had purchased the rule set already and didn't really know what to do with it, which makes a lot of sense. It's extremely challenging to deal with something so big and sprawling, as I said. One of the things, and I mentioned this throughout the video if you watched, one of the things I think that increases the challenge here is that there are very few random tables in this rulebook, and as such, it will leave you as the solo GM or as any GM using this, the need to either come up with things on your own or seek other supplementary source material to populate places, or to use and rely on some of the adventures that, or the other publications that already exist that are officially published with Coriolis, and I'm showing one of them here. So I think in the case of this video, I made a specific effort to not include a lot of other random tables that I sought out to support the material because, well, first of all, frankly, I don't have a ton of sci-fi random tables, and I can't easily reach into my resources to pull that kind of stuff out. And the things that I do have are sort of such lower complexity in a sense that I don't think they would really work. Now, I say lower complexity, but really the basic rule mechanic of this game, as you saw if you watched the gameplay part at the beginning, is quite simple. You're gathering a pool of dice and you're looking for sixes when you roll them on the d6s, and you're adding up your score. If you're using a skill with an attribute, you're just adding up that level of dice, and that's what you're rolling, and you can get a +1 die if you have somebody contributing, if you have a cooperative kind of role, and somebody can contribute if they have that skill as well. So for example, Yala here could contribute to an observation roll by adding 1 die if Sani was making it, but could not contribute to survival because Yanni doesn't have that skill. That's, in essence, that's the core. On the combat, it is a little gamified in the sense of there's action points that you need to keep track of, and that also can be useful to the soloist because it gives somewhat of a framework. It structures combat a little bit in a way that I personally find useful if I'm trying to do something by myself, because it takes away some of the management. So you can see here that there are the different delineations of how much action points are used by slow action, firing, or administering first aid, a normal action, which is a close combat attack, or a fast action, like taking cover or picking up an item, something like that. Speaking of items, again, unless I missed it in this entire 370 plus pages of rules, there's not one random table of items at all, anywhere. There are many. Here's the space combat map. I mean, in a sense, it's geared toward large scale activity because you have the very many pages of details of space stations and what a salvage ship looks like and the deck plan of this courier ship and things that for my style of play personally don't really impact it. So for me, all these pages of tables of the different types of starships and the maps of them would have been much better served by a list of items, a list of just anything in the world, environmental aspects of things that you might encounter on a world. So I think that is obviously just a style of presentation. There's a great deal of space given toward the world building here, and that is a place where you could really hone in on something so specific. So I just randomly opened to this culture in the third horizon. There's discussion of literature and storytelling and technology used to spread news across the horizon. And one could just pick up the smallest of details. The theater is very popular throughout the horizon, from the street corner puppet shows on Algol to the acrobatic Moran theater. The proxy media has spread to the public thanks to the syndicate's illegal erotic proxy trips, but more and more proxy novellas are beginning to circulate. I mean, this right there could be the beginning of a setting, of a story, of an adventure. But to develop it, you would need to go outside of what is just in this book. And again, that would be true of a GM sitting around a table as much as it would be for the soloist. Obviously, as the soloist, the burden falls on you to find that material and also play it out. The book is beautifully laid out, and as I tried to show in the course of the video, very lavishly illustrated. Is it something that is convenient necessarily to use? I think for the soloist it's great, because you're really involved in experiencing it as a piece of, as a designed book, and that helps a ton. You know, again, look at all this detail on the ships here, and these are great illustrations. They're certainly get you into the theme of it. For me personally, it doesn't help my gameplay. I think I would just wonder what it's like for a GM sitting around a table to, I mean, even just to, again, not right now, but to carry this to someone's house. If you're playing at someone's house, it's pretty heavy. It's enjoyable. It is involving. I think just reading through the lore of it is fantastic, and I think could be the starting point for a story and a sci-fi adventure that maybe doesn't even take place in this world necessarily, ultimately, if you're looking for more supplemental material. And I think that that's the key to the main message I would say here, that if you're going to approach this book, know that it is going to require some supplemental material in terms of random tables and things like that. It is extremely doable, and I think what I showed in the video on how I created this story is really a roadmap. I think you could take those steps and very effectively work out a detailed story that you could play out by yourself as a road into what is a vast and sprawling universe of a rule set.